Do you swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, thank you. Talk into the microphone.
Good morning, Mr. Montoya. Can you please explain to the jury how you are employed?
Morning. My name is Lorenza Montoya, and I am a compliance officer with New Mexico OSHA.
And what do you do as a compliance officer?
I'm a safety inspector. Accident investigator, in summary.
And what do you need to do to become a safety inspector, accident investigator with OSHA?
Well, you'll require some experience in the field of safety, workplace safety, industrial safety, chemical safety. Accident investigation requires some training, and that can be accomplished on the job.
What does OSHA stand for?
Occupational Safety and Health Administration.
And what is that a state agency?
New Mexico OSHA is a state plan, whereas federal OSHA is at the federal level nationwide.
Is the Bureau part of the New Mexico Environment Department?
Yes.
So tell us about your experience then in workplace safety.
Sure. My experience with occupational safety began in the U.S. Air Force as an aircraft mechanic. I was in charge of our hazardous materials program. And following that, I worked for the New Mexico Department of Health at the Behavioral Health Institute, performing more sort of safety and walkthroughs for our patient health in that scenario.
And how long have you been a safety inspector with OSHA?
Been with OSHA for 5 years.
How did you get involved in the incident we're here for today in this case?
OSHA, one of its duties is to inspect workplace accidents, incidents, or anything that results in a fatality. In this scenario, we were notified of a workplace fatality, and so I was assigned the inspection.
And when you're assigned an inspection that's reported to you, what is the purpose of your investigation?
It's a fact-finding investigation. Our goal is to try to identify what may have caused the incident, so we can either recommend or require corrective measures to prevent such a thing from happening again.
And did you do an investigation of the workplace safety incident that occurred on the set of Rust on October 21st of 2021?
Correct, yes.
What does that mean? What does your investigation entail?
So the investigation is to, if possible, find a root cause for whatever may have led up to the incident. Sometimes things are not so simple, and they have a lot of complicated factors that contribute them to occurring. In this scenario, the investigation is to try to identify what led to the accident occurring, despite whatever measures may have been put in place to mitigate or prevent in the first place.
And how do you do that? What did you do in this investigation?
The same as any. When we conduct investigations, we interview witnesses. We interview members of management. We might engage with industry professionals if necessary. Visit the site, take photos.
Did you do all those things in this case?
Yes.
When was it that you visited the site?
We originally visited, I believe, the following day, October 22nd, was when we were notified.
Did you communicate with the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Department as well?
Only in the beginning, when we were trying to ensure that we would be able to access the site without potentially stepping into a crime scene.
Which witnesses do you remember interviewing in this case?
That day, the only individual present on site was Catherine Rowe Walters.
Okay. And in the course of your investigation, how many witnesses did you interview in this case?
I could only estimate off the top of my head. I believe we interviewed 17 people.
Did you interview Ms. Gutierrez?
We did, yes.
Did you interview Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Did you interview Mr. Baldwin?
Yes.
Did you interview Sarah Zachary?
Yes.
Gabrielle Pickle?
Yes. So, no wait, not Gabrielle Pickle, sorry.
Did you review any documents in this case that aided in your investigation?
Yes, we reviewed many documents.
Is your investigation, how is it that you gather documents that you review?
Generally, we request any safety policies, programs, or trainings from the employer.
And what specific documents did you review in this case?
In this case, we had requested any safety policies that they may have, and they provided us with, they're referred to as safety bulletins, and they have a longer title, which I can't recall the name of. They're organized by a committee of some kind. But safety bulletin number 1 is the applicable safety bulletin for firearm safety.
Okay, and what other documents did you review?
They gave us a host of other of the safety bulletins, which cover various miscellanea you encounter on a set, from lighting to electricity and so forth.
What about communications between the various witnesses and cast and crew on set? Did you review any of those things?
We did receive some of those documents, but those did not come from our employer. They came from our individuals that we interviewed.
So the individuals you interviewed, the witnesses, provided you with emails and texts?
Some, yes.
And were you able to come to any findings and conclusions in this case?
We did come to a conclusion.
And were those findings, did you put those findings in a written report?
We did.
Once you do that written report, what's the process there?
We draft the report, proofread it, and when it's completed, we assemble the case file together, and if necessary, we issue citations. And in this scenario, we did issue a citation.
Who did you issue the citation to in this case?
Rust Movie Productions, LLC.
Once you issue, what was the citation that you issued for? Why did you issue a citation?
The citation was issued because, in our conclusions, we determined that the management team was responsible for a series of failures that, in our opinion, accumulated in an accident.
Okay, and by management team, who do you mean specifically?
Specifically, we mean the chain of command above Hannah Gutierrez, beginning at the lowest level with Sarah Zachary, and then Gabrielle Pickle, and then Dave Halls.
So did your findings then include any... So then your findings that you just spoke of, those didn't include Ms. Gutierrez, right?
As an employee directly engaged in the work, she is mentioned in the report frequently, but in terms of who do we identify as a member of management, and thus who do we consider responsible, she's not. She's just an employee.
Okay. And once you do your report and issue the citation, does the employer, the production company, get an opportunity to contest that?
They do.
And did they contest that in this case?
They did.
Was a fine ever ultimately levied against the employer in this case?
There was, yes.
What was that fine?
They came to a settlement agreement with the department at $100,000 even.
And in your experience, have you seen the state of New Mexico levy such a high fine like that to an employer for workplace safety ever?
I believe we have in the past.
is that an average? Is that a usual fine amount that you see?
For typical inspections, no.
Is it higher or lower?
This would be higher than normal.
In your report that you write, once you're completed it, are there any other individuals who review and audit your work?
There are.
Who explain to the jury the levels of review and audit of your findings and conclusions in your report?
Right. So the proofreading, final edits, and that sort of thing fall to first initially my supervisor, and then her supervisor, who is our program manager, and then from him it would pass up to our bureau chief, Bob Genoway, and as well as our legal team, and potentially our department director, all the way up to the secretary, if it's potentially something that is a matter of public interest.
And in fact, in this case, did the secretary for the environment department review and audit your report and your findings?
He reviewed the report. By the time it got to him, there was nothing left then just to review it.
Okay. And does your report and your citations, are those a matter of public record?
They are.
And is your report kept in the New Mexico OSHA Environment Department?
Yes.
Did you bring a copy? I saw you walk up to the stand today with a folder. Did you bring a copy of your report today?
I have a copy of our investigative summary. Sometimes we refer to that as a narrative.
Okay, and is that the document that you prepared that we've been discussing this morning? That's 11 pages?
It is 11 pages, yes, so possibly.
Okay, and it's this document that you make your findings and conclusions, right?
Yes, we list them out.
Your Honor, I'm going to hand the witness what I've marked as Defendant's Exhibit GG. May I approach?
Your Honor, may we approach?
Yes.
So, and if you need to refresh your memory from looking at your report, I wanted to go through. So did your report include factual findings from your investigation?
Yes, it does.
Did it also include conclusions that you reached from that investigation?
Yes.
And did you conclude whether, with respect to Hannah Gutierrez, whether she was or was, I guess, did you conclude that Hannah was not provided with enough time to inventory and inspect the dummy blink rounds?
Objection.
Approach.
So like I stated, Mr. Montoya, in your report, did you conclude whether Hannah was provided with enough time to inventory and inspect dummy rounds and blinks?
That was one of our conclusions, yes.
What specifically did you conclude about that?
May I look at the folder?
Would it refresh your recollection to review your report?
Yes, it would.
Okay. Do you have it in front of you, or do you want me to hand you a copy?
I do have a copy in front of me, unless yours is highlighted or marked.
Page 7. Okay. So what were your conclusions with respect to whether Ms. Gutierrez was provided enough time to inventory and inspect the dummy rounds from her employer?
We came to the conclusion that she was not afforded time to conduct her duties to the best of her diligence.
And who didn't give her enough time to do that?
She had been instructed by Gabrielle Pickle to focus on other tasks.
And did you determine whether Rust had any process to ensure that live rounds were not brought onto set?
We determined that Rust did not have any specific processes or procedures to prevent that possibility.
And why was it that was not that was on the employer, in your opinion, versus the armor?
In that manner, the employer is asking an individual to perform multiple safety-related functions for them, while also telling them that they're spending too much time engaging in those safety-related functions and need to devote more time to other duties. And on that matter, we determined that to be maybe a managerial decision.
Okay. And did you conclude whether Rust Management provided the armor, Ms. Gutierrez, with any authority on training?
We concluded that she effectively had no authority to make any sort of training decisions.
And in your investigation, was that failure to give the armor authority to determine training, was that a violation of any Rust safety procedures?
It was.
What was that a violation of?
Safety bulletin number 1. One of the required items is that the armor determines when training is necessary and if retraining is necessary based on somebody maybe mishandling a firearm.
Okay, and what evidence, did you see any evidence in your investigation about the armor, Ms. Gutierrez, attempting to attain additional training on firearms for the actors?
Not specifically attempting to retrain, to acquire more time for training, into my memory.
Okay, and was that did the employer, I guess, did Ms. Gutierrez raise any concerns about not being provided adequate time to perform her armor duties?
Yes.
And what in your investigation was Rust's response to that?
Our conclusion was that those statements regarding not having enough time went unheeded and uncommented on.
By whom?
Gabrielle Pickle and possibly Sarah Zachary or Dave Halls.
Sarah Zachary and Dave Halls?
Yes.
Did you make any conclusions in your findings in your report about who the Rust safety official was on set?
We did.
Who was that?
Dave Halls.
And did you find any fault with anything that Dave Halls did?
So OSHA considers the entire management apparatus to be a single entity. And in this scenario, there are these 3 individuals who are part of this upper level of management. And Dave Hall's responsibility as the safety coordinator on set, we certainly found that there were a number of safety bulletin number 1 policies that were not followed or adhered to that would fall within his purview.
Okay, and were any of those pertaining to having the actors point guns at crew members?
That is one of the items in the safety bulletin.
And are you saying that Mr. Halls and Rust top level management were in violation of that?
Rust's management team did not take measures that were required in safety bulletin number 1 to permit the aiming of a firearm at a camera or whatever the case might be.
Okay. And you talked a little bit about Rust not providing Ms. Gutierrez with sufficient time to thoroughly inventory ammunition. By ammunition, I mean blanks and dummies. Were there any findings with respect to Rust providing their staff sufficient time to inspect this ammunition to ensure there were no live rounds present?
No, our conclusion was they weren't afforded time. I'm sorry.
And with respect to whether or not Rust Production showed an indifference to hazards associated with firearms, what was your opinion on that?
The conclusion of the Bureau on that was based on the sheer number of requirements listed in Safety Bulletin number 1 that were either ignored or otherwise not at all followed or totally contrary in practice to. We found that Rust was willful. They were plain indifferent to the recognized hazards of firearms.
And when you're doing this, does OSHA have a requirement to look at fault of specific employees?
As part of our inspection process, we try to identify a root cause if we can. Whether an accident is caused because someone is falling asleep at the wheel or whatever the case might be, we do try to identify those things. In this scenario, we weren't necessarily able to identify any particular standout reason why an employee would be to blame.
So what was, in total, bottom line here, the root cause that you found?
To summarize the entire report would be that Rust Movie Productions identified a hazard, a workplace hazard, working with firearms, and they adopted firearm safety policies, but they totally failed to enforce them, train their employees on them, practice them, reference them, nothing. They adopted it and it stopped at the word adoption. Nothing further happened.
Okay. And was it brought to their attention by Ms. Gutierrez and others that there were these deficiencies?
Safety concerns were raised regarding the policies listed in Safety Bulletin number 1 not being followed.
And what was Rust's response to those concerns that were raised by Ms. Gutierrez?
Again, they seem to have chosen to simply not respond.
I'll pass the witness.
Cross-exam.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Montoya, good morning.
Good morning.
I'd like to talk to you a little bit before I get into any of the details, a little bit more about the inspection process that you typically conduct. How long do you have to perform this inspection?
OSHA has a limit of 6 months to the day to initiate and conclude an inspection.
All right. So does that mean that in some instances you may not have all of the evidence that is available from, for example, an investigating law enforcement agency?
Correct.
And in this case, is it true that you did not have the sheriff's report at the time that you issued your report?
Yes, the sheriff's report was the following day or two, I believe.
All right. So just to be clear, none of the information that was included in the sheriff's investigative report made its way into your report and findings, correct?
Correct. Only their initial public release, press release.
The press release.
Only that.
Okay. But not any of the actual investigative materials?
No.
All right. Is OHSB authorized under law to fine or penalize individual employees?
No.
Only employers, correct?
Correct.
And as a result of that, I believe you explained that your primary role of investigation is to look at what the employer did in terms of creating a potentially hazardous situation.
What they could do to prevent it, or what they did to create it, yes.
Great, thank you. So even if as part of your investigation you found concerning conduct by an individual employee, you couldn't issue that person a fine, correct?
Not individually, no.
Great. And this is not a criminal investigation that you're conducting, correct?
Correct.
All right. And so you mentioned you did not review the Santa Fe Sheriff's Office report. Did you conduct a forensic download of any of the individuals' phones involved in this incident?
No.
Did you review the over 100 behind-the-scenes videos that were produced by production outfitters?
No, those were not available to us.
All right. Did you review any footage from the filming of the Rust movie?
Only a small clip that was put into public media.
Was that the clip, just kind of a few second clip of Mr. Baldwin manipulating the firearm out of his bandolier?
Correct.
So all of the other videos that were filmed as part of the movie, you did not look at any of those, correct?
Correct.
All right. Did you hire any sort of firearms expert to review the revolver or ammunition?
We did not.
All right. Did you hire or consult with an expert in armor, like film armoring?
No, we did not.
All right. Did you review any of the fingerprint analysis from the FBI?
No.
Did you review any of the DNA analysis from the FBI?
No.
Did you review any of the ballistic chemistry analysis from the FBI?
No.
Are you aware that Ms. Gutierrez worked in her role as an armorer for 10 of the 12 filming days?
As far as we're aware, it was only permitted 8
Okay.
days as an armor.
So you would be surprised to hear that she actually was afforded 10 armorer days out of the 12 filming days.
It would be news.
Yes, okay, great. Are you aware that Ms. Pickle testified at trial that if Ms. Gutierrez had asked for more than those 10 days, she may have granted them if they were justified?
I'm not aware that she testified that.
All right. Are you aware that on the morning of October 21st, 2021, Ms. Gutierrez had approximately 3 hours of time in which she could have inspected ammunition or done a safety check of the revolver involved in this incident?
No.
Are you aware that it's been testified here in the court that Ms. Zachary was Ms. Gutierrez's supervisor when she was performing props, but that the roles were actually reversed, that Ms. Gutierrez provided instruction to Ms. Zachary with regard to the armorer duties?
Yes, with some interplay in that they're not quite peers.
Great. And do you agree that Ms. Gutierrez in her role as armorer contributed to some of the issues that you identified in your report?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure. Do you agree that Ms. Gutierrez in her role as armorer contributed to some of the findings that you issued in your report?
No, I'm not sure I could necessarily agree.
Okay. Give me just a minute. If you were to return to page 4 of your report. On paragraph 13,
Okay.
the last sentence, unless a round is removed from a storage box or firearm and inspected, it cannot be verified as a dummy round. Do you believe that that is the function of an armorer to perform this inspection that you've indicated on this report?
I believe that would be one of their many functions, yes.
Right. So if she failed to do that, then would she have contributed in this regard?
OSHA's opinion is that management has to enable the work to be done in the first place. So If she didn't do that, our question would be, why wasn't someone ensuring that she would do that? And thus we would turn back to management.
Okay, sure. And that gets back to the whole fact that you're looking at the employer primarily as the basis of your investigation, correct?
Correct.
All right. Do you agree that if Ms. Gutierrez loaded live ammunition into a firearm and then passed it off as a cold gun, that would be a workplace hazard?
Certainly.
All right. And then lastly, are you aware, I believe you conducted an interview with Ms. Gutierrez, correct?
Correct.
And in that interview, she indicated to you that she asked 2 producers for additional training time, correct? Do you recall that?
I don't recall it off the top of my head.
Okay. All right. Nothing further.
Redirect.
But that little hypothetical that Mr. Lewis just said, if Ms. Gutierrez had passed off a loaded gun as cold, would that be a workplace hazard? What if Rust had not allowed the armor sufficient time to inspect that gun and rushed her and instructed her specifically of what they wanted her to do? Whose fault would it be then?
Come in. Come in.
I think I need to rephrase my question. So if in what Mr. Lewis had stated, if there was a gun passed off as cold, whose fault would it be, or whose responsibility would it be to ensure that the armor had sufficient time and resources to make that gun safe?
It's always the responsibility of management to supervise effectively and quality control effectively. If an employee is conducting a safety-related task, they pass it off as safe, and supervision does nothing with that, and they allow it to be implemented. Supervision's responsibility to double-check that.
And was it also Rust's responsibility to ensure that the employee had to take those? I guess, did your investigation reveal that Ms. Gutierrez had specifically requested more time to do those safety checks?
She had expressed on more than one occasion that she did not have sufficient time.
And Rust's response, was there any fault in Rust's response to Ms. Gutierrez's concerns and requests?
In one scenario, Gabrielle Pickle responded that to the point that there are no more armor days out of the 8 left. She had responded that then no more training days are to occur. So their response has been to just, okay, we'll cut it then.
Cut off the firearm training days.
Right.
And did you actually receive a copy of the Santa Fe Sheriff's report after this report of yours came out?
Our office received a copy of the report, yes.
And had you guys previously requested that many times from them?
We had previously requested whatever documents they'd be willing to share or assist with.
And is it necessary to review fingerprints to determine whether Rust Management demonstrated an indifference to hazards and violation of their own standards? Do you have to look at fingerprints to do that?
No, not at all.
Do you have to look at DNA to do that?
No.
Or any firearms expert?
Not to determine their safety conduct and so forth, no.
Okay. And were there any other communications that you reviewed between Ms. Gutierrez and Gabrielle Pickle that demonstrated or supported your findings that Rust was at fault in this and not Ms. Gutierrez individually?
Objection.
I'll rephrase the question, Your Honor.
We're going to strike that question. Go ahead. Make another one.
Are there You said that you can, is it true that you can actually find fault with specific individuals' conduct?
May I ask you to clarify?
Yeah, can you find fault with, when your investigation, you're looking at specific individuals, and can you say that individual was wrong for doing this?
Objection.
Well,
I think you're right. I think you already answered that question, so I won't ask it again. Were there any other communications that you observed between Gabrielle Pickle and Ms. Gutierrez that was evidence of arrest not providing Ms. Gutierrez with the necessary resources that she needed?
Off the top of my head, there was a text conversation and then a separate email.
stay.
He hasn't talked about what it was. Without stating what the text conversation is, can you please continue your answer?
Yes, and a separate email conversation.
Okay, so you reviewed actual texts and emails between Gabrielle Pickle and Ms. Gutierrez.
We reviewed screenshots of their texts and emails, yes.
Okay, and the relevance of without saying what's in it, the relevance of that informed which findings in your report?
Yes.
Which ones?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, the conversations you reviewed between Gabrielle Pickle and Ms. Gutierrez. What did those pertain to in terms of your findings? Which findings did that?
Apologies. Yes, so I would have to review the text versus the email conversations to remember which one is which. One is regarding the notification regarding that they have used all 8 of their armor days and the no further training then, because that would require more days. And then the other conversation, I believe, was regarding firearms being left unattended or something of that nature.
Okay. And what was your finding, and if you need to refresh your memory by looking at your report, that's fine, but what was your finding with regard to firearms being left unattended?
Objection.
Approach.
So you can answer the question, Mr. Montoya. It was the finding in your report pertaining to firearms being left unattended.
Sure. May I refresh my memory?
Yes, please. Okay. Does that refresh your memory?
Yes.
What was that finding?
So our conclusions from that were in that conversation they expressed that the production team, meaning Gabrielle Pickle and her peers, had received reports that firearms were being left unattended, and Ms. Gutierrez-Reed's response to that.
And I want you to tell me what her response was. I want to
Okay.
talk about your finding based on her response.
The finding was that an employee expressed that this was a very serious safety-related job and that they needed time to conduct that effectively.
Okay. And that was your finding was that what? that rests?
We consider that heightened awareness. An employee is informing management that there is a safety concern or that they have an issue with something, and it is then on management to then take that concern and do something about it. In this scenario, it resulted in no response.
Okay, thank you.
All right, this witness is excused. Thank you. Next witness.